Hi folks, we're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about an issue that seems to come up quite a lot about where has the masculine man gone? Where has that responsibility taker, that family man, that breadwinner, where have they gone? They seem to have disappeared. In their place are simps pathetically looking at pornography online or begging disdainful, scornful women for sex. And is that where is the masculine man? Why do we not have that masculine man, that responsibility taker anymore? Or there are so few of them that it's close to irrelevant. Where have they gone? Is it something that happened organically and naturally? Is it something that was forced upon our societies by other events beyond our control? Where have they gone and what caused it? And is such an idea of the masculine man even possible? And if we look at the extremes of someone, say, rich and single, like Andrew Tate, for example, I mean, he's a well-off guy, and he doesn't have to be worried about the minute-to-minute entanglements of a domestic life under financial pressure or something. That's not the area that he lives in, or the space that he exists in. So wealthy people are freed from those concerns, I guess, but there's only a very small number of people have that sort of wealth. And but for the rest of the population that once did have the masculine man, the risk taker, the responsibility taker, or not so much the risk taker, but the work maybe, but the responsibility taker, then this is something that where has that gone, and can it even come back again? Well, let's have a little look at this. There was a time, and within my lifetime, for goodness sakes, that a man working in a factory or an ordinary job, an average wage job, could buy a house, an ordinary house, nothing fancy, no waterfront mansions, but could buy a house, buy a car, and have a wife and 2.4 dependent children. The wife wouldn't work when the children were young. Maybe she'd work part-time as the children went to school, something like that. But in the end, that could be afforded on an average wage. So the role of the man as the breadwinner and the responsibility taker in that regard was really structured into or part of that era of the Western lifestyle. Now, it wasn't always that way. There were times, especially in an agricultural type environment, this pre-industrial revolution, where everybody had to work and bring in the crops and plant the crops and milk the cows and feed the chickens and so on. So everyone had to work, but as work became more specialised, particularly industrial, not that women didn't work either, by the way, but that eventually changed to a point where the average wage was enough to again live that sort of life, being able to support a dependent family. Thus, the man achieved a position of the leftists and the feminists would say social power, but with that power came responsibility. It was his job to deliver bring home the bacon, as it were, and make sure that the rent was paid and the car payments were made and and so on. That was his job to deliver that. Now, he may not have liked his job. He may not have wanted to do it. He may have volunteered for overtime in order to put, one of the kids through school. To take sacrifices, making a lot of sacrifices. So putting himself last and putting the family first was really part of that wider, unwritten, I suppose, social contract. Now, this goes back a long way. If we go back more than 3,000 years, and look at the writings of the stone tablets and so on in the Persian Empire, the days of the Persian Empire, So again, 3,000-4,000 BC, ancient Egypt and so on, it came up time and time again that when it came to taking responsibility and discharging those responsibilities in a responsible manner, that men had to be, it was men's job to do that. Now, sure, there are a few exceptions, and sometimes all the men in the lineage for to become king died off, and there was only a woman left. So to keep political stability, they would give the job to the woman rather than risk a civil war and risk various factions vying for the throne. So there were exceptions of this. Queen Elizabeth I of England was a classic example of that. And then we look at, say, the ancient Roman times, where again, the diaries and the scrolls that have been uncovered from places like Pompeii and Herculaneum and so on, where and even if you look at the histories by Tacitus and the like, it was women were viewed as not being able to take that responsibility and not being able to discharge it impartially. That responsibility of making decisions, of taking on that responsibility, would fall to men. Now, again, this goes back, whether you look at this 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 years ago, as far back as recorded history goes, it was a man's job to take that responsibility. And women were viewed as unreliable in that sense. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't some exceptions. There must have been, just mathematically there must have been, but it was always been considered it's a man's responsibility. Again, going back many hundreds or thousands of years, we see the same thing occurring even in the 1850s, when it was starting to become more common for girls to go to school and at least do a couple of years of what today we call high school. And even then, the documents in the English Education Department said, well, don't mark the girls too hard. Don't be rigorous in the testing. Go soft on them, because their mission in life isn't to take the sort of serious responsibilities that a man will. So the idea was that men would be rigorously tested because they would have to take on rigorous and difficult and unpleasant responsibilities in their lives. Now, this was even the same when I was a kid. The view at the schools, certainly when I was younger, less so, I was sort of more into senior high school, but the view was that you as a man, or young boys would grow up one day into a man. It was your responsibility. You had to take that. It was your job to look after the family. It was your job to bring home the bacon and protect them and to make the decisions. And those decisions better be good decisions because your family will be affected. If you fail, then your family will suffer. You just think about that, Billy Bob. And those were the sort of sentiments that were expressed. And my moderately well-to-do grandparents sent me to a sort of private school, and in this private school they taught manners on how women had to be treated. Seriously, how you had to stand up and do this and do that, and so I had these manners drilled into me at this school, and and they were already well out of date even at that time, and I still had the overhang of those manners as I got older. So I was at a friend's place, and his sister, who was a little bit older, she was like a year or two older than him, and she came into the room, and we were doing something, playing chess or something like that, and she came in, and instinctively, as in it had been trained, I stood up as a woman has come into the room, so I stood up as a show of respect and good manners. I mean, these were the sorts of sentiments that were around. It wasn't just a matter of responsibility, a matter of self-respect and showing respect and these sorts of things. Now, that may all have gone, the equivalent of, say, holding open the door or opening the car door, things like that. Paying for dinner, if you invite someone out, you invite a lady out for dinner, you pay for the dinner, that type of thing. So all that sort of stuff, Now, it was already changing as I was in high school. And from the time I entered high school to the time I finished high school, but before I went to college, the change was quite substantial, actually, just in that time. So that was probably the tipping point, more or less, where times changed. Now, there's a difference in the economics when and I'll use 1970 as just the sort of the baseline here. In 1970, again, the guy working in the factory down the road on the average wage could afford to support a wife and 2.4 dependent children. The challenge that someone on average wage today is struggling to support themselves, let alone a dependent wife and children. If you're on an average wage today, you couldn't afford to rent even a compact one-bedroom apartment on your own. Certainly not in Sydney, anyway. And you would have to share, the apartment, or like to pay the rent. You'd have to share the apartment with at least one other person, which means someone sleeping in the lounge room, or you've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend moves in, or something like that. And without that, you wouldn't be able to get by. If it's a two-bedroom apartment, then you would absolutely need two, if not three people. And this is really the way it goes today. Just younger people I'm aware of listening to their chatter, and they may make a sort of a passing remark, and they're employed in lower wage jobs, but they've got some shitbox two-bedroom apartment at the arse end of wherever, and they still need three people in there, and they still have to share one clapped out car because they can't own, no one person can afford to own it, and on it goes. So it's vastly different today. So the traditional man of the breadwinner and he can't exist economically. He doesn't exist economically. So that's one reason. Now the devaluing of the marriage contract, in the late 1960s and into the 1970s, and certainly that period, sort of 1969 to 1985, that sort of 15, 16 years, the entire Western world went insane with divorce laws that meant that the marriage contract had no value, but at the same time it meant that the man had to take the responsibilities that traditionally the family breadwinner had taken. He still had to keep those responsibilities, even though the woman could say, well, I've decided to be a lesbian, and by the way, I want the kids, I'm keeping the kids in the house, and you have to pay for everything. That sort of thing. That was a massive change absolutely monumental change, one that denied all natural justice, common sense, and everything else. It was purely an ideological bit of insanity. Now, there are also other forces at work at the time as well. What later on we'd call the globalist cabal was already at work in a nascent stage, but it was already at work in the late 60s, and looking at, we've got all these workers, women, we've got all these workers at home, only 30% or 40% of women work. Most of them only work until they get married. Then they come back, and some of them work part-time or casual, that sort of thing. And so we've got all these women who could be workers and consumers. So why don't we do something to get those women into the workforce and to get them consuming consumer goods, goods and services? And this would increase the overall household income, which again would be spent on goods and services, good for the economy. So the thinking went. Now, I'm not sure how well they thought this through. I think they can't have been unaware of how the birth rate would decline if they did this. And I think back then they would have decided, well, not a problem if the birth rate decreases. We've got all these places of surplus populations around the world, places like India and so on. So we can if we need more people, we can just get them from there. And so I'm almost convinced that would have been the thinking, although they wouldn't want it scare the horses too much by pushing that line. Nonetheless, in order to get women to enter the workforce, and not to make the workforce attractive, because it wasn't, not to make the going to work attractive, because it wasn't attractive. They had to make out that not going to work was worse than going to work. And the Soviet communists did this, or the Chinese communists for that matter, or any communist country does this. They say, well, don't look at it that you're having to go to work. Don't look at it that way. Look at it that we're breaking the chains that are binding you in the kitchen, the oppression, the man who's oppressing you in the kitchen. And we're breaking the chains. You're liberating women, and then you're going to go to work and you're going to earn this sort of thing. So they presented it not as a desirable thing to work, but it was the home, the family, the kitchen, the whatever, they did reverse propaganda that the family life was unpleasant. You know, when men were oppressors, evil Nazi fascist oppressors, and the workplace was this benign land of paradise and wonder. So they did it that way. I don't know how successful it was. I'm sure with women who hated men, women with bipolar disorder, lesbians and fanatical activists, these sorts of things. I'm sure that message had resonance, but otherwise it didn't. It had no real resonance, and women sort of were quite slow in many ways to adopt it. But what was taken up was all the propaganda about how men are evil oppressors. So we've got a few things occurring at the same time here. The economics are changing, so that the one wage and the average wage, which most people make, the average wage can't support a family, dependent wife and family anymore. So that's one. So the woman kind of has to go out to work, if not part-time, then full-time. If she's working full-time, then why would she have children? Why would she have as many children? She'd be obviously investing more time in. Then with affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion, women were conned into supposedly investing in careers, but actually they weren't. The bar was just lowered. At high school, women who wouldn't have had a snowball's chance of even graduating from junior high school were being given junior high school diplomas, and then with an IQ of 80, they were given senior high school diplomas. Then they were given graduation to university. IQ was still 80, and then they do bullshit courses like the study of smells or something, and so they would gender studies and any course that ends in the word studies is a bullshit course. So women are being then kept at university. They're then being saddled with huge debt, and then that they couldn't afford to get married or have children anyway. That would be beyond even their wildest dreams. Now, also at the same time, the economics of it all, house prices and rents were going through the roof. So a house that you could buy for $15,000 in 1970 is $2 million today. And so, and also, the test I used, what was the first apartment I ever rented, and what was the average salary back in the day? And first apartment I ever rented was $20 a week, and the average salary, I think, off the top of my head, is about $7,000. Now that same apartment is $550 a week to rent. Exactly the same. In fact, there's less because you don't get a garage with it now. Back then you did. So it's $550 a week a rent. So in effect, well, not in effect, in actual reality, the rent relative to the average wage is 3 to 4 times more than it was back in the day. So it just goes to show you how far the rents and how quickly they increased, or mortgages, it doesn't matter, relative to income. So these in combination mean that the responsibility-taking breadwinning man can't exist anyway. The architect, the structure of society no longer allows that person to even exist. So in terms of being the masculine man, the breadwinner, the responsibility taker, then he can't exist. There's at best 2 or 3% of men could fit that category, unless they've inherited a lot of money or something like that. But the amounts of men that economically can exist within the economy, that they just don't exist anymore, and they're allowed to exist. The economy won't let them exist. Now we look at the corrosive effects of feminism, that every man is an oppressor, rapist, fascist, Nazi, homophobe, and whatever, and so on. And this is drilled into young boys from almost kindergarten through to junior school, into high school, and certainly in university. Now the underwriting evidence of all men are fascist, Nazi, rapists, and it's all lies. Everything is lies, and the statistics are invented or exaggerated. If there are two rapes on college campus in a year out of many tens of thousands of students, alleged rapes, then they'll say there were, instead of 2 rapes, they'll say there were 200. They're constantly exaggerating, inventing, and fabricating without any pushback. They're just able to do it, and it just goes straight through media front pages and the like. So there's if you like, a cultural sort of structure that's been developed. Is all relationships are bad. Any power imbalance. And we're looking at this Marxist sort of thing today, where any power imbalance, presumed and alleged and ideologically contrived social power imbalance, means that the person with the most social power is Hitler, and the person with the least is, an oppressed, a victim in a concentration camp. And that paradigm is constantly pushed. So there's really nowhere for this so-called masculine man to exist. Now, I've seen a number of videos online where they talk about the masculine man, and they were things like if some street hoodlum is assaulting a woman and beating her up or stealing her handbag, that sort of stuff, that brave, strong men, masculine men should stand up for women, strong men should stand up for the little woman. I don't know. If you look at people like the Daniel Penny case in New York, you'd want to really rethink that. You'd really want to go, well, I'm not so sure. It used to be the way that there were insecure men would do, and I remember this as a young man, or late teens, I guess. There are always these men running around saying, you were rude to my wife, which is an Australian sort of lower class slang. They don't say wife, it's wife, oi. This sort of accent. And then they get right in your face, and then you have to apologise or beg forgiveness or something, and that type of stuff. I took a dim view of that, and thought, well, hold on a minute, are you going to be a big tough hero man for the little woman? Is that what you're trying to do? You fucking fuck. And I took a dim view of that. But firstly, there was no rudeness, just a guy inventing a. It's the same as if you walk through a rough area, somebody would say, are you looking at me? It was that sort of thing. And there were constantly men wanting to show off how big and tough they were, and how they were, heroes, and they were going to stand up for the little woman and this sort of thing. Again, I thought, nah, I'm not buying any of that. So that sort of thing. There's the fake hero man, the masculine man. I don't think that ever was a sustainable thing, although a lot of women used it. See that guy over there? He was rude to me, Billy Bob. Go and bash him up for me. That type of scenario. So I think what is the modern masculine man? There can't be a responsibility, as in the breadwinner. There can't be a responsibility taker anymore. And if you can't take responsibility, or you're not able or allowed to by the economy, can you be a decision maker? Can you be someone that takes that decision, makes it? Well, you can't. The economy isn't going to let you. So what place does the modern man have? Now, it's different again if you're wealthy. Like someone can get up and parade around the public stage, and because of their wealth, they can appear to be, and probably are, decision makers and and responsibility takers. Now you see it in the workplace where a male manager, particularly if it's a straight white male, they may, because they're well trained and they're experienced and credentialed and accomplished, they may be prepared to take responsibility. I notice this in the customers and clients and master contractors, main contractors that we deal with. I notice that I'm constantly the only guy in the room that's actually prepared to take responsibility for something and get on with it and do the job. Most people won't. They even, the men are all girly men. They want to rush into committees and some of the pathetic prostration that some of these men do to women. And you can have quite a young, obnoxious, snot-nosed, gender studies type chick in the meeting, and she thinks she's got the right to lecture her boss's boss about his behaviour. Don't talk about those sort of things. It's making me feel uncomfortable. I don't like you saying that. I mean, this is again some 22-year-old snot-nosed, talking to like the CEO that way and thinking she's got every right to. She can hold that straight white male to account. She can hold him to account because he's a fucking Nazi and she's a morally superior individual. Well, I wouldn't tolerate that for 1 second. But anyway, I have to sit there and smile. So I don't know if the masculine man, that image we have of a masculine, responsibility-taking, decision-making man could even exist in this modern world. And if that sort of man's to come back, then we're looking at major economic changes that would be needed. I mean, among them would be making housing affordable. I mean, that so that one wage, an average wage, can actually support a dependent. I think until that sort of paradigm returns, or some approximation of it, that the responsibility-taking masculine man can't exist. That the framework, the societal framework that would support it, also doesn't exist, and thus the masculine man cannot exist. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.